Welcome to the second edition of the Rant Forum. I am your host, Luca Jubina. Below is the Gmail address that you can contact us if you have questions about. I will try to get to as many people as possible, but I will reply, be it good or bad, or if people do critique on the show. Today is September 11th. It's 14 years after the attacks on the World Trade Center in New York City and the 4 planes that were hijacked. And it's something that I would like to talk about because it's something that's very dear to me. During the time of September 11th, that day I happened to be actually off of school, and I was going to school to be an aircraft maintenance technician. I was also at that time a student pilot. I had not yet received my pilot's license, but I had a student license, which means that I could fly alone without another person, unless it was a flight instructor who was at the time certified. Like many of us, I watched those planes hit into the 2 towers, and the towers crumble, and the first 10 to 15 minutes after the shock wears off, you sit there and you look at it because we are desensitized. So we are used to seeing movies, we're used to seeing films, and it seemed like a movie. It seemed like a movie that was broadcast on all channels with all of a sudden the anchors that we watch, the talking heads on different television stations, sitting there and talking to us about a tragedy that was unfolding right before our eyes. One of the questions that I recently had, and being at September 11th, I am going to go into this. Brian H. actually wrote, "One of the largest pieces of legislation since 2001 has been the Patriot Act. Is there any evidence that through this bill we have thwarted a terrorist attack? Between TSA, NSA, Homeland Security, and other governmental agencies, we have given up a lot of liberties in the name of quote-unquote safety." And I want to answer that. I think the important thing to annotate here and to speak about is just how docile the American public became after this tragedy. It's hard to believe that everybody sat and agreed to everything that they imposed on you afterwards. Nobody raised a hand to anything. Richard Nixon, as a matter of fact, was ousted, was essentially forced to leave out of his presidency for recording people that were essentially the Watergate scandal in his presidential cabinet. President Bush afterwards, within a few months, instills the Patriot Act, and absolutely nobody raises a finger. And so today, people can record you if you're on TV. And let me give you a little bit of a heads up here. If you can go onto a DVD player that you bought at a Best Buy, and you can live stream a film in HD quality and put it on your wall and watch it live, why would you think that there's absolutely no way that the same technology can't be used against you that you've hooked up for them to look and sit and watch you and see what you're doing? You could be recorded at all times, whether you're walking in and out of your house, what you say in your car, what you say in your house, even when the TV is off. That technology is out there and has been out there. Now, to speak about the TSA, I actually, during the time, shortly after September 11th, while I was going to school still for aircraft maintenance, which, by the way, the jobs before for aircraft maintenance were $28 an hour starting with benefits. The jobs after September 11th, roughly within 2 weeks, the news came out, essentially in our school, that they were starting people out at $8.73 an hour without benefits. So we were going to school to learn how to fix airplanes for less than a lot of people were working in fast food at the time. And absolutely every single person I went to school with who was Middle Eastern knew they were screwed, knew they weren't going to get a job anywhere near a car, an airplane, anything mechanical, anything in other areas. And so when they graduated with the same license and with the same schooling and understanding of the technology, they went, some of them worked in their uncle's bakery, other ones went and who knows where they ended up. But they did not end up in the aviation industry, as did a lot of people not end up that I went to school with. This country has time and time again shown that it's capable of sitting back and doing absolutely nothing to help create an enemy. And the problem that they are all too happy to make a solution. A great example actually is Pearl Harbor. I have here an excerpt of a memo that was on President Roosevelt's desk on December 4th of 1941. And it reads, "In anticipation of possible open conflict with this country, Japan is vigorously utilizing every available agency to secure military, naval, and commercial information, paying particular attention to the West Coast, the Panama Canal, and the territory of Hawaii. And that was a 26-page memo. Now, people sit back and say, well, that's a conspiracy theory. Why would President Roosevelt ever allow that? Well, World War II started in 1939. It was building up since 1933, around the time when Hitler officially came to power. And the majority of Americans and America did not want to go to war. They considered it a European problem. But when they were attacked during Pearl Harbor, and I think it was something like 2,300 Americans that day lost their life, the public opinion of war and going to war swayed dramatically overnight. And next thing you know, we're on the beaches of Normandy, we are in Europe, we're fighting against the Italians, we're fighting against the Germans, we're on the side of the British, and history is written the way it has been. Now, just months before the September 11th attacks, Larry Silverstein acquired the lease on the World Trade Center for $15 million, just months before this. This was on July 24th of 2001, and immediately went to work to change the insurance policy, stating that, and adding to, if the planes were ever hit by terrorist activity, or the towers rather were hit by terrorists, if there were terrorist bombing, if there were even planes that actually hit the World Trade Center. Just months before the September 11th attack, Larry Silverstein acquired the lease on the World Trade Center for $15 million. And that was on July 24th of 2001. And under his insurance, what he immediately went to work on was making sure that within the insurance policy, because you have your natural hazards, you have earthquakes that you insure buildings for depending on where they are, you have other things, he actually went through and insured it for terrorist attacks. And added into that, terrorist attacks of planes even flying into the buildings. Now, the insurance at the time covered $3.55 billion per an incident, is the way that it was described. Larry Silverstein, after September 11th, actually took his insurance company to court because his claim was that actually what he should have gotten paid is around $8 billion. Not million, we're talking billion here. He invested $15 million. He was suing for $8 billion, claiming that it was $3.55 billion per incident and there was 2 terrorist attacks on his building. Now, before we speak badly about Larry Silverstein as being an investor who just happenstance ended up taking control of a building and changing an insurance policy 6 weeks before it suffered the greatest attack that we've ever seen on American soil as far as terrorism goes, let's make one thing clear. September 12th, every single plane was grounded. The only plane allowed to fly that day was an El Al Airlines, an Israeli El Al Airlines flight to Israel. The President of the United States of America could not get on Air Force One that day and fly anywhere. And don't say it's not because he didn't want to or they thought air traffic was blocked or other planes would have taken off. He wasn't able to actually get on a plane and fly away, the President of the United States. But yet, a 270 passenger aircraft, a civilian passenger aircraft, was able to fly to Israel on the 12th. And the interesting thing is who was on that aircraft. And that we're going to talk about in future broadcasts. So a couple things to discuss with September 11th and why I think if the United States didn't have something to do with setting it up, and when I say United States I don't mean the people, I mean the government specifically, is the fact that when you watch the first 2 planes hit the World Trade Center, there's a pitch involved if you fly an airplane. And anytime you've flown, you'll notice that anytime the plane either banks left or banks right, you'll feel the pilot actually put back pressure on because you're disturbing the airflow over the wings. You don't actually have as much lift. And so, when the second plane hit, you'll actually see it spin off to hit and speed up as it goes down because the pilot was not trained enough to keep that aircraft at a level altitude. So let's just say all the attackers, four airplanes hijacked, every single one of the attackers had the same amount of training. I find it extremely hard to believe that around the Pentagon, around one of the cities that's the most recorded cities in the United States, where our senators live and work, where they walk the streets, where they go to restaurants, where representatives work, where the president works, where the presidential cabinet works, there is no video footage of that plane, no good video footage of that plane, actually coming down and gliding 10 feet off the ground in the ground effect area of an aircraft to be able to hit the Pentagon in the one area that was just enforced, that also had all the records of the 2.3, I think, trillion dollars that were missing from the U.S. Treasury at the time, something that Donald Rumsfeld spoke about the day just before. But what did we all do? We sat back, we let our stocks, we let our retirement funds, we let everything drop. Here's something that's hard to imagine, but something that people have to deal with. That day, around 3,000 people were wiped off the face of the planet. Stocks, bonds, retirement funds shouldn't have gone down even enough of an amount to be noticeable. And yet I remember speaking to my mother, I remember speaking to my stepfather, their retirement funds, and they worked in different industries, and I don't have to get into which ones they worked in, but they worked in different ones, went down oftentimes 60 to 70%. So their retirement funds drop off 60 to 70%. And why? Because of September 11th. 3,000 people die, and apparently every single person must have had $2 billion in their pocket for everything to fall this way. And they're not the only ones. There's a lot of people here that lost a lot more than they did because they were worth more during that time. The only reason that another airplane has not been taken down in this country by terrorists is because terrorists haven't wanted to do it. And that's the truth. And taking your shoes off and going through a scanner, which by the way is also from war profiteering. See, they create this element of danger, of suspense, of terrorist activity, and then they give you the immediate solution. So the day right after, they told you exactly who was involved. It was these 16 or 18 terrorists, all of them who apparently had ties to Al-Qaeda, and in addition to that, Saddam Hussein somehow got interwoven and intermeshed within the whole thing. The agenda that was actually right there from the start before Bush was even elected president. But what did we do? We elected him again, and of course we would, because I don't think America has ever not elected a president for a second term during wartime. And in a way, it actually would be probably irresponsible to do that. But what did we do? We made it so people cannot go on aircraft without going there hours early, taking off your belts, taking off your shoes, getting scanned. And going back to this question that Brian H. had asked, no, absolutely, I don't think anybody has been caught from the TSA, NSA, Homeland Security, or any other government agencies. There have been people that have been suspected of terrorism, and as soon as in the United States you are suspected of terrorism, you are a terrorist. That's just the way of things. I was working at the time at Detroit Metro, and 5 people I worked with were suspected of terrorist activities because of contacts they had with the Middle East, because I worked at Detroit Metro. It was close to Dearborn. It's the highest Arab population in the United States. It's like what Chicago is for Poles. And so I just wondered to myself if they had ever come to my house and raided my house, and they would have put online a story that said, immigrant to the United States, recently acquired pilot's license, was going to flight school, worked with 5 suspected terrorists, and had maps of airports. Automatically, in your mind, you would think terrorists, and there's absolutely no other reason that you should think otherwise. Now, I'm not a terrorist, and I'm not saying I was. What I am saying is, when you give enough of the facts in people's minds, if it's 80% correct, then it must be 100% correct. And a lot of people are absolutists. And the absolute worst thing that you can have in this country as an individual, with all the free speech, with the ability to be able to talk to different people, is the mentality to go into conversations and say to yourself or say to others, this is my stance on things. I don't care what you say or what you think. I don't want to hear it. You are so closed-minded, then why do you even live in a country where you're allowed the freedoms of expression and to be able to have free thought and expression of which? But let's get back to this question. The NSA, the TSA I've spoken of a little bit. Let's go to the NSA and the whole Edward Snowden affair. I actually, in 2004, when I joined the United States Air Force, I was in Fort George G. Meade, Maryland, which is where our broadcasting school was. And one time, after having a couple drinks over in Washington, D.C. area, I got on the road and I accidentally got off in the exit that went straight to the TSA. I mean, you get off the exit and you're right in the TSA building. And it didn't help that I have an accent and, of course, was wearing a Russian hat. They were very pleased with that. So I think I got detained there for about 5 to 10 minutes. A little bit of alcohol on my breath, not much, but just enough. And showed them my military ID. Of course, I was let go. The National Security Administration and Edward Snowden comes out and tells you that they are recording people's conversations after you full well know about the Patriot Act. What the fuck did you think they were doing? What could you possibly think they were doing? What do you think the NSA does if you can't go there and take a school trip or go around there, walk through the front door and take a tour of the goddamn place? What did you possibly think they were doing? Here's a news flash for you people that were actually surprised by that information. McDonald's serves Big Macs. That's a news flash for you. There's something new. Get excited about that. Get happy about that. NASCAR has car races, and the NFL, believe it or not, promotes football games. And if you don't fucking understand that, kicking this person out for coming out and saying things that you should have known as a taxpayer in this country for the last however long you've been alive for and however long you've been working for, if you don't understand that, I'm not sure I can even help you here. I'm not sure there's even an ability. And by the way, everything that I broadcast, I want people to actually go and research. Because if there's something that I'm wrong about, please bring it up. I'll go through and I'll talk about that. And if I'm wrong with something, unlike Bill O'Reilly, unlike other people, I will actually admit to the fact that I'm wrong. I will tell you that you're right. That's fine. That's fine. We all make mistakes. Information, it's not the easiest to come by nowadays anyway, as it is. Of course, you get a lot of it, but how much of it do you get that's actually credible? So September 11th happens. We are no more safer today than we have ever been. Liquids you can't bring through the security gate. But one thing you can bring, and I'm not trying to tell you how to bomb an airplane, but if somebody wanted to, this is the way to do it. Plastic explosives have no scent, no smell, no taste. They look like plastic, essentially. They're rubbery. They look like feta cheese, actually. Have you noticed that through the airports, food doesn't get swiped, and even if plastic explosives did, it wouldn't turn anything up on their little CT scanning machine? That's the thing that they use to wipe off, your suitcase, your briefcase, your hands, sometimes your shoes, the inside to see if you've been in touch with any explosives. And all you need for plastic explosives to explode on an airplane, which by the way is pressurized at 10,000 feet, I believe, mean sea level, MSL, is a charge and an electrical component and something that you could easily hide within a pen. The pen would go through easy. You have headphones that the flight attendants give you, and essentially you have a bomb on the aircraft. Now, you're not going to be able to get in to the cockpit the way that you were able to on September 11th, because up until that date in this country, every single terrorist overtake of an aircraft, what they did was overtook the airplane, landed it somewhere, and demanded money. So pilots were actually all too happy to give up their aircraft, as long as they thought somebody could actually land it there. And they didn't even have an option. A lot of the companies then, American Airlines, USA Air, it was even an FAA ruling, I believe, at one time, that what you would do is turn your transponder to a certain number. I think it's either 5,700 or 7,500. And that gave out the code to the airports that are within a surrounding area that essentially your plane had been hijacked. So the hope was that you could take that plane, hijack it, usually fly it to Canada, some country that's neutral, that would be less aggressive than perhaps the United States, and demand money. But that's not what happened, because since September 11th, this is why people now on aircraft who have gotten too aggressive, have threatened somebody, have had a few too many drinks, have shown absolutely any sign of not being in direct cohesion with that airplane landing safely somewhere, have gotten tackled aboard aircrafts and have gotten arrested off of them. The planes landed earlier. There was just a recent incident actually in Chicago. And you never hear from them again. You might hear a little bit of the terrorist charges. You might hear of something else. But you never hear from them again. And I don't know. What are they doing? Are they serving time in Guantanamo? Are they sent to prison here? what's essentially happening to those people. America, wake up. We are no safer now than we were 14 years ago. What we have is a new level of war profiteers, and the majority of which are in office and people that we elected. Now, I'm not blaming you for electing them. You had to elect somebody in there. You had to go and vote for somebody, correct? That's your American duty, apparently, the way that the majority of people look at it. However, they give you the people to vote in office. They give you the ones that are the most likely to win. And I don't see a difference between a Democrat or a Republican if you come in and you're screwing this country and its people over. I don't see a difference. You might as well be a terrorist. And just because you wear a tie and a little American flag and you prance around, and by the way, the money that I think Congress people make every year is something in between $140,000 to $180,000. I think it's closer to the $180,000 mark. And yet their net worth every year goes up $1 million. And you have some there that have been sitting there for 20, 30 plus years in Congress. They weren't doing shit then, and they're not doing shit now. And if you believe for a second, if you think for a moment that they actually care about you, then write me and tell me the last time you've actually contacted a congressman or a senator or a representative or someone and reached out to them and asked them for help with something. And they've helped. I myself have reached out 3 times to congressmen since coming out of the military, waiting for military benefits, and still 6 years later haven't heard shit. What you hear is that it goes through an intern who, I don't know what kind of intern is there. He's just trying to kiss as much ass as he possibly can to hold his little internship job so it looks good on his resume and he can move on to whatever other job that he has. And they know full well when the VA or when any other agency, be it unemployment, be it workers' comp, be it whatever it is, gets a letter from the congressman, they take their schlong out and they piss on it because they don't care. Because they're puppets. They're beyond puppets. A puppet actually has somebody that's controlling them. I would say these are a lot of brainless people that take money and sit there and are going to fight and throw filibusters on things. Because it's not about, in this country, coming to a solution. It's not about coming together as a cohesive unit that is working for the good of this country. You don't have that here. You have a bunch of people that are essentially experts at creating a standstill. This has been our second broadcast. I hope I sufficiently answered some of the questions here that Brian H. actually proposed. What I haven't, I will get back to at a later date. So I ask you to watch, critique, write on the email, tell me what you think, and good, bad, or indifferent, I will get to every question that I possibly can. However, I do want to hold the show to 20 minutes and no longer than that, and I will be broadcasting at the very least 2 times a week. If I could, I would be broadcasting 3 times a day. That's not always possible. But it is what it is. Enjoy the rest of your day. And let's not forget the people that actually did pass away on September 11th.